Hi, good morning. Colorblind Architect here, and I am coming to you from my new home office. Oh, well, is it actually a home office? Well, it's actually detached. It's not inside my house, it's in my backyard. But finally done. 2.5 years since I first conceived of this project, and it took so much longer than I ever thought it would because honestly, I made the same mistakes that a lot of homeowners I see do. And that is to go with the cheapest contractor. Oh my goodness. At first, I tried to build it myself, which is by far the cheapest contractor. That was a big, huge mistake. And then I hired a cheap contractor because I saw the price of what other guys were charging, were wanting to charge me. And I thought, oh no, there's no way it's got to be that much. Yeah. So here's the thing. A simple fact of the matter is in construction, you can have two of three things. You can have time, quality, or money. Choose two. You can only have two. You cannot have all three. In other words, you cannot have an inexpensive build. You can't save money on the build and also have high quality and a fast turnaround time. You're always going to have to balance it out. You're always going to have something that you sacrifice. So if it's time, in my case, it was time. I ended up having to sacrifice time. And honestly, in many things, I had to sacrifice quality too, because unfortunately, another problem with hiring the cheap contractor is you sometimes get some things that aren't done quite right. But in my case, we managed to fix all those things. Obviously, I was supervising very closely as much as I could, but there were still so many things that I wish I could have done better. And number one of that, I wish I would have hired the more expensive contractor that I knew and trusted because I'd been working with him for years. And I didn't go with him just because he was $20,000 more expensive than the cheaper guy. And that's a mistake. And it's something that I had to learn the hard way, even though as an architect, I had seen it so many times with my clients. And that is the irony of the whole thing, is that even an expert, even somebody who knows the process, can still be sucked in by the allure of cheaper prices. So what does that have to do with architecture? Well, same thing in architecture. You can hire the cheap guy, the draftsman that your cousin knows, that is barely a high school graduate. They might do a fine job. Then again, they might not do your job at all, and they might screw you out of several $1,000s. It's kind of a weird thing, It's like it's almost like this whole licensing thing, where if you hire a licensed architect, guess what? They're not going anywhere. A licensed architect is here to stay. A licensed architect has met the state board requirements for minimum levels of competency. So at least if it's a licensed architect, at the very least that they're going to perform to at least a minimum level of competency. And chances are they're probably going to far exceed that. But you can also, here's the great thing about a licensed professional, is if they screw you over, you can actually complain to your state's licensing board, and it becomes something that hurts their business. So we as licensed professionals actually have a huge vested interest in the fiduciary responsibility for our clients to actually do what's right for our clients. The incentive structure is already built in. So this is one thing that I would like to speak out on, is I've heard so many times, and especially here in Utah, there's a very strong libertarian wing of politics here, where there's this idea where government's in the way. Government just makes things more complicated. Governance just unnecessary regulations that slows down the economy. And to that, at least with regards to licensing, what I'd like to say is that is bullcrap. Licensing is a very necessary part of helping to ensure the public health, safety, and welfare. Now, whether or not we need some adjustments to our licensing laws, that's a debate that we can have. But to say that we don't need licenses for professionals would skew the incentive structure. If you understand economics, you understand that everybody has incentives to do various things. And a lot of the reason why we have professional licensing laws is so that we arrange the incentive structures for licensed professionals so that they will focus on the good and well-being of the customer. Take, for example, a doctor. A doctor, while you're under the anesthesia, a surgeon could be doing whatever the heck they want if it wasn't for all the licensing and regulations that help ensure making sure that that surgeon, one, has the minimum competency, which I think we can all agree. We want somebody to be competent in doing the work that they're doing, especially if it's in an area where the general public tends to not have the expertise level. So take, for example, architecture. The general public tends to not have the expertise in the building sciences and in construction, and also in construction law, the building permit process, the planning process, for example. And so that's one of the reasons why it's important to hire a licensed professional, because that's our day-to-day job. That's what we do. And even though as a licensed professional, we may not be perfect, just like I said, I messed up with this office. I hired the cheap contractor. That was a mistake that I should have known better, right? But on the flip side, it's those experiences, and it's also the humanity of each individual. Those are important factors to remember too, because I'll tell you right up front, as an architect, I am human, therefore I will err. So that means when there's a problem, I tell my clients, look, if you think I've made a mistake, let me know. I want to fix it for you. I don't want something to fester. Don't think just because I made a mistake that somehow I suck. Maybe it's just because I missed that time and I'll fix it. These things always happen. Every project has some kind of mistake on them because, again, we're all humans. And it's also important to remember that the contractor is also a human. They make mistakes too. And so to get too angry at a contractor for screwing something up, that doesn't really help. Instead, look at how you can try to solve the problem. Try to work with the people that you work with. Try to advance the goal of completing the project rather than to point the fingers of blame. And with that said, I mean, look, we all love to hate on lawyers, but even lawyers have their place. Even lawyers have a proper role within the professional universe. So we all need each other. And admittedly, it's kind of funny sitting here on January 20th, 2025, when I'm recording this. Many people are freaking out, I'm sure, throughout the world that Donald Trump is about to be re-inaugurated as president. And a lot of people are very worried, like, what the heck happened to America that we voted so stupidly, right? And I'm not going to argue one way or the other on it because honestly, this last election, um, I had no clue what to do because I didn't like either candidate. Um, I really felt like uh, I wasn't sure that I could trust either of them at this point based on the past few years of history. But we get what we get sometimes. Sometimes there's no way to avoid the situations that we're in. And again, the best thing that we can do is try to work together. One of the problems that we've had in society has been this division that happens. And I think a lot of times it's so easy to point fingers and say it's that group over there, or it's that person over there that's making the world a worse place. And most of the time, it's way more complicated than that. Most of the time, we're getting locked into these mindsets of pointing fingers and blaming others based on groupthink and algorithms of social media platforms that are designed to keep you sucked in, designed to keep you engaged, right? Um, but they don't necessarily help. What's much more important is that we learn to live and work together with those that we live around, like whether our neighbors be good or, like on our side politically, um, or they could be, completely, they could be a completely different, they could have a completely different opinion than us. And same thing happens in construction projects too, right? We can get into these battles, these contentious battles over, oh, whose fault was it for this error in the plans or in the construction? And oh, well, was this change order caused by this and that? And yes, sometimes it is the architect, sometimes it's the structural engineer, sometimes it's the contractor, sometimes it's the owner. Sometimes it's forces outside of our control. And I think the most important thing to do is to remember that we're all human, we're all making mistakes, and we all need to learn to live with each other. And so I think as we have this new president coming into the White House, we have wars going on throughout the world. Specifically, the worst one right now is in Ukraine, and just the tragedy that is. And I think we need a lot less division in this world and a lot more coming together. And that's one of the things that, although in the past I feel like I may have contributed to that division, and for that I am deeply sorry. I look at the growth that I've had over the last few years, and I recognize that I'm in a much better place mentally now than I was before. And I feel like I'm trying my best to learn to love others. And the reason for that is, unless we start learning to love our neighbors, we're never going to be able to overcome just the stupid squabbles, the stupid fights that make life miserable. But instead, if we learn to love and forgive and to work with each other, then we can actually have a happy and joyous experience in life. And that's what I want. I personally want to live in peace and harmony with others. And hopefully you do too. So what do you say we do that? What do you say we try to work towards bettering ourselves? Work towards loving our neighbors? Work towards creating just a better world by each and every day we do the things that we can within our own sphere of influence. Might be small. And I know this video is kind of cheesy, but whatever. You get what you pay for. You're not paying for this video, and I'm not getting paid for it either. So, whatever. And if you watched this all the way through to this point, good for you. Thank you. But yeah, that's my goal for 2025, is to make more videos of things like ArchiCAD, computing, even some Revit, sure. And also make some videos about some of my adventures. I've got some fun adventures planned this year. One of the things I'm hoping on doing later this summer is to trail run Kings Peak in Utah. I'm also hoping on doing a bunch of other summits, throughout Utah, possibly some other states. And I'm also hoping on taking you along with me for the ride. There's so much joy and happiness that we can have in this life, and we just have to go out and do it. We have to go and make this life the life that we want to have. And so I'm very excited. Hopefully you are too. Thanks for joining me. I'm the Colorblind Architect. Peace out.